Our moms would tell us, don't run with scissors, keep your hands inside the car, and always wear clean underwear. Times have changed, and the opportunity for real danger to our lives has grown. This time, we look at risky behaviors. The doctors are on call tonight.
A mask off, old Lone Ranger, and you don't mess around with Slim.
Funding for this program is provided in part by
Avera is a proud sponsor of On Call on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
and by the South Dakota Foundation for Medical Care, the Medicare Quality Improvement Organization for South Dakota. Additional funding provided by Dakota Care, the Brookings Health System, Regional Health, the South Dakota American College of Physicians, and Swiftel Communications. Closed captioning for On Call is provided by the generous support of Avera, the Brookings Health System, and Fishbaugher Financial Corporation.
This week is our first show from the new Yeager Media Center on the campus of South Dakota State University, and our topic is all about risky behavior. In order to get the bugs out this week, we're not live, and so please don't send in your questions, but save them for another week, since your questions are the lifeblood of on-call television. Risky behaviors include smoking, drinking, too much driving and texting, driving under the influence of alcohol, riding a bike or cycle without a helmet, not using seat belts, eating too much, and not getting up off that couch, to name a few. The question remains, how can we make changes to avoid these risks? Tonight we have Dr. Annette Bosworth, also known as Dr. Boz, an outpatient internist with a special interest in informatics. She is the founder of Independent Medicine Professionals and Preventive Health Strategies, a nonprofit organization focused on accessible, quality health care for the marginalized populations in Sioux Falls. Also with us is Dr. Thomas Braithwaite, a hospital internist or hospitalist for the last 15 years or so, and now in an executive position for the Sanford Health System. And this April, he steps up to the role of governor of the South Dakota American College of Physicians. Welcome to On Call.
Thanks, Rick.
So, yeah, you guys have both been here before.
Veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Veterans. We picked you for our first show. Annette, tell us a little bit about you and where you come from. We're all three internists.
Yep, internal medicine physician. I'm from South Dakota, born and raised in small town Plankington. And I practice in Sioux Falls, but am a mobile clinic, so I travel to see people when they're in treatment centers or when they are in their home, in nursing homes, in the park if I need to.
And you had your training where, Annette?
University of South Dakota for School of Medicine, and then I was in Utah for a University of Utah residency, and I practiced there for about a decade.
10?
10 years in Utah I was there, so 3 years of residency and about 7 years in practice.
And then you came back to South Dakota because you just love it here.
You know, you have 3 kids, and there was a pivotal moment where I said, I know how to raise kids in South Dakota. I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing without the resources of friends and family and, South Dakota living, which is...
And your husband is from South Dakota?
Yeah, his graduated from O'Gorman many years ago, but his family's from South Dakota and Iowa area, so...
Great. And Tom, you're a South Dakota boy too.
Absolutely. Born in Sioux Falls, Washington High grad, went to Augustana, USD for med school, then down to the University of Iowa, where I did my internal medicine training, and came back to the state in 1985.
And you were going to be a neonatologist or something like that. What?
Well, no, I was initially going to do perinatology, high-risk obstetrics, but then I decided I didn't want to do the gynecology part, and what I really liked was the high-risk part. So, and I like taking care of acutely ill people. I did general internal medicine for the first 18 years of my life here and professionally in South Dakota. And then I transitioned to help start our hospice program at Sanford back in 2003.
So I said 15 years, but it was 9 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
eight
or
years,
9.
8 years, yeah. And then just last summer, I stepped into my third career now as Chief Quality Officer for Sanford Health in the South region. So.
Right, I couldn't quite get that when I was trying to prep for you. What are you in the executive realm and as Chief Quality Officer?
He takes care of risky behavior.
Oh, yeah, in the hospital.
In the hospital.
But quality, let's talk about quality in the hospital before we get into our topic.
Well, we have traditional metrics within the
metrics. Now that's a
metrics. The way we measure. It's the way we look at how well we do at things. How well do we take care of people with a heart attack? How well do we take care of a patient with pneumonia? We have ways of measuring that, standard best practices. But there's more to quality than just that. The second leg of sort of a three-leg stool is safety. And that's the avoidance of harm. And we have really begun to understand in the last 10 to 15 years how big an issue that is, that despite our good intentions, we unintentionally harm individuals within healthcare. So the discovery and the mitigation of harm is a second part of quality. The third is that of making the patient experience optimal, because we know that patients who have a good experience of care become engaged in their care, and when they're engaged in their care, the quality of the care is raised as well.
Well, and they sensed that they had quality. I mean, for the person to feel like that was the right thing that was going on is what we want. Well, thank you both. So I'm going to ask this question. So we're talking risky behavior. What do you think is the number one risky behavior that is occurring in the population of South Dakota people in general, and then teenagers?
Well, I'll take teenagers first. As an internist, we are certified for adolescents and adults, but most of our colleagues tend to gravitate towards the adults. And I've shifted my focus towards adolescents in the last couple of years and really been amazed at some of the choices that are right in the backyards of South Dakota. They've been here forever, but has become such a prominent part of their generation, and using of drugs, sex, drugs, rock and roll become the theme, which they have been in those adolescent years forever and ever. But it's incredible how much I see of marijuana. Entry drug of tobacco, actually, very common, is the first thing they use. Alcohol's been there forever and ever as well, but marijuana is incredibly prevalent in the kids I see.
Yeah.
I think within the adult population, it's not taking or heeding advice we've received or following paradigms of good health that we all understand. It's being able to apply that and fully understand and take it into yourself and take your own responsibility for your own health. So much of what we can do for our own health we know, we understand. But it's the application and ownership of it that's really the challenge.
We've kind of gotten lazy, I think, as adults in this society. We don't have to work at it. And my take would be that even if you were overweight, that if you could stay physically active,
absolutely,
then the rest of it would follow. You wouldn't be as much of a smoker. You wouldn't be as much of an overeater. You would stay strong enough, and you would keep going. I would really think that's the bottom line I'd like to hear.
Yeah, when you look at those behaviors of the smoking and the drinking and the television, all of those are, their mind is getting a distraction. There's a reason for those behaviors. I look at the number of prescription sedatives for bedtime routine, where you say, doctor, I can't shut my brain off, give me the pill. And you look at the reason why. It's the push. I stimulate with a cigarette, and I then have a cup of a glass of wine at bedtime, and now I need a pill to go to sleep. And so you look at risky behavior, and it has a lot to do with that rushed life that is, Western life. Yeah.
Bad choices. Yep. If you could get that exercise in, you'd sleep a lot better.
Absolutely.
Few would disagree that one of the most risky activities we engage in is illegal drug use. This behavior has ramifications not only in the short term while people are abusing them, but in many cases those who abuse drugs develop physical or mental problems that haunt them for the rest of their lives. Intercepting the abuse of drugs by our children is of vital importance for our entire society.
Biggest thing obviously in town here, which anywhere, is marijuana. We're making marijuana arrests left and right. It's getting down to the point now where I'm getting information about middle school kids now using marijuana. So it's getting widespread. Prescription medication is huge. We got a lot of kids that are taking, hydrocodone, Oxycontin, Valium, that kind of stuff, Adderall. At one point in time, I think Adderall was $20 a pill, I think, on the market. Kids were selling it for. It seems like, because we're always, South Dakota, which is kind of a good thing, we're always a little bit behind what happens down south, in like Texas, California, all that kind of stuff. So the real hardcore stuff hasn't become a big issue here. Now, there are people dabbling in it, there are people doing it, but it's not as widespread as the marijuana is. The kids that I've talked to, that I've actually had interactions with, and try to make an effort with them when I get involved with them for drug use, is to ask them why. What's the appeal here? Why smoking marijuana? Why? A lot of kids now are saying it's easier to get marijuana than it is alcohol. If we've got parents that choose to turn the other cheek and think, okay, my kid's not doing this, when they know they are and not dealing with it, more problems, And that's what we're kind of tending to see, is a lot of either they just really don't know, or they choose not to know. We are very cautious about getting them cars. We're very cautious about when they're driving, what they're doing. Oh, if you've been drinking, please call, all that kind of stuff. But yet we'll give them an $800 iPhone and not monitor what they're doing on that phone. When they can email, they can take pictures of themselves, everything on these phones, and we don't think anything of it. We'll even go buy it for them. And all that's networking for these kids. That's how they do all this stuff. They'll send text messages or emails back and forth. When's the marijuana coming in? How much does it cost? All that stuff. Because you just don't follow up on that. A lot of kids, even adults, they use drugs or alcohol to self-medicate themselves, for whatever reason. Maybe they've gone through something, a rape, or they've gone through a domestic assault or whatever and never got it dealt with. So they try to figure other ways to deal with it instead of the appropriate ways, because they feel they have nobody to talk to. No parent wants to think their child's bad or naughty or causes problems, and you should feel that way, but we also should come to the reality that my kid is capable of doing this, and I'm not going to continue to stick my head in the sand and think my kid can't do this, my kid won't do this, because it's all around your kid, it's everywhere. And for your kid to be the one kid that's never going to do anything wrong is highly unlikely. They're going to do something wrong once. That's why they're kids. Kids are supposed to make mistakes, and we're supposed to help teach them instead of instead of defending them all the time. The first step is society in general has to understand that drug problems in society are not a law enforcement problem. That's a society problem. And as long as society continues to accept it and continues to minimize it and continue to think that, my kid would never do this or my dad would never do this or whatever, it's always going to be a law enforcement problem. Because, the first thing, when something bad happens, the first thing people say is, well, what did the cops do about it? It's not just our problem. And, then you take the next step, it's not just the school's problem. It's society's problem. Everybody should work together in dealing with this. And if you've got one entity or two entities saying, 70% or more of the kids are smoking marijuana, it shouldn't be left up to those two entities to go, okay, we're going to try to fix this. Everybody should come together in the community and say, what are we going to do to fix this problem?
Thank you, Officer Joe. That was sobering information. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the most important way to really treat someone, let's say a youth, who is addicted to whatever drug?
So I'll tell you, I did not come into addiction medicine the way most physicians do, which is most physicians end up in the passion about this because they've suffered their own addictions. And then as you look through the treatment plans that have evolved through the years, there's been some gaps that I think are amazingly shrinking as our ability to study the brain, and then getting back to behavior 101 becomes the focus. And I think taking away what is it they're addicted to, that is not the focus when I am looking at a treatment plan for somebody. I don't care if it's alcohol, I don't care if it's porn, I don't care if it's cutting, throwing up. When they have an addiction, you're looking at where was the trauma? what happened to them where they had an injury, which is abandonment or major loss of life in the family, and then not nurtured through that injury. And you look at that core beginning as the perfect place to begin the treatment plan. Because if you can't find where the trauma began, you are wasting your efforts to get them to kind of close that injury.
But do you always find that cause? I mean, there are a lot of good kids I remember when I was young that were in trouble.
Well, honestly, I think that is the privilege of medicine, is that when you take away the noise of your own life and the world of medicine, and you are one-on-one with a kid, and you can watch and understand the stuff that comes in medicine, not the first year you do this, not the fifth year. I'm a decade or so into this where I can say, that makes them uncomfortable, chase that. Yeah. And honestly, it has become more rewarding than anything I've done in medicine to say, that's where the injury is.
And so how do you say, okay, move on, kid? I mean, here, or you are loved, and here's how I can give you a feeling of love, or what? How do you help a person with a hole?
So I think the first thing is finding the conversation. And you can usually find it by going back in the history and saying, your first time you used alcohol was when? Your first time you used marijuana was when? Your first time you used cocaine? These kids have 15 sexual partners by the time they're 16, and they had sex and they used drugs at this age. What happened then? And that leads me to a conversation, at which point we begin. And I think of therapy, and I think of healing this addictive behavior by identifying the injury and always referring back to this part of, can I get them to touch those memories without relapsing? And so you study alcoholism at 50 or 30 or 20 or 15, and when they can go back to these injuries and continue to heal, whether it's through journaling or small groups or peer groups, and not use a substance, that's when you know you're getting in the right direction.
So have you seen, Annette, in your work, have you seen, what is this? Are there some circumstances that surround this that take, for instance, you have kids a lot of kids have gone through trauma. Mm-hmm. Some develop substance abuse, some don't. Do you think it's a chemical thing in the brain? Do you think it's the environment, the network, the social network around them? And what, have you sensed any trends in your work?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. The injuries happen. All of us can think back to childhood and say, this was a tough time for my family. You can say, the family dog died and it was traumatic for me. But then the family nurtured around and walked through the story with me. And then it's the environment of the family. When the trauma happens and it blows up the family, like moms, there's a couple of very traumatic stories over the last week where the daughter, her brother got killed. Mom comes to got shot. Mom and daughter go to get the son, and they pick him up, put him in the car, and their family's poor. They run out of gas on the way home. And so the brother or the son, with mom or daughter, dies in the back seat, and then another couple of traumatic things happen. And then the family splintered, and the society didn't come together. They didn't have a church. They didn't have a extended family that was functional enough to rescue them and help them kind of lift back out of that ditch. And that's really the key. When I see trauma happen and then nobody in society showed up to say, let's walk together.
I will interject. I also know of a group in Brookings called Teen Challenge, and I think there's probably other groups, but Teen Challenge of South Dakota is in Brookings, and it's a very religious group, and it's men. And it's men from 18 to 50 who have had the worst abuses that you can imagine. And I've just watched, I've been the physician support group for Teen Challenge, and I've watched them bring men with a parenting, religion support through this tough times, and they're sober, there's no smoking, there's no nothing.
It's a very big deal. And it's male role models is what you've got there.
Male role models.
Right.
That's it. I think it's huge.
When you
male
look
role models.
The teen moms that end up with the children, or then they go to grandma, but grandma's no longer married to a guy, so there's no male role model. And these teenagers get to be, adolescent boys are the focus of what I see in these heavy, if they have ADHD, then they're even more likely to be there. But why was that? And there is the lack of stability, the lack of a good example, over and over and over again.
Well, we're going to have to jump to other risky behaviors. One risky behavior that has been in the news lately is distracted driving, whether it is texting, eating, talking on the phone, makeup. Not for guys, but for girls. Anything that takes your attention away from the task of driving safely. One Brookings High School student is working to educate our legislators about the problem in Pierre and Washington, D.C.
About 2 summers ago, I was at a conference for a high school organization, and I was there and I heard from this organization that stands for NOISE, and it was National Organizations for Youth Safety. And they were looking for 20 youth across the nation who could be on their teen leadership team. And so I've been out to Washington, D.C., and I interned out there this summer with the Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, and I testified for a federal bill out on Capitol Hill right now called the Stand Up Act, and it's a safe teen and novice driving unification program. And it really, what it does is it tries to unify all 50 states, because right now across the nation there are different GDL laws, graduated driver's licensing. So right now, while I'm in South Dakota, I can drive at 14, whereas in New Jersey, you can't get your driver's license, your permit, until you're 16. And we're seeing that right now, New Jersey's statistics about teen driving accidents and crashes are way lower than South Dakota's. When you go out there and you speak with representatives, Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. When you speak with them, they always hit hard on the fact that enforcement will be a problem, that it's hard to enforce distracted driving. But the question I raise every time I hear that excuse, and I'll call it an excuse because that seems to what it be, is if seatbelt safety was such a concern, we seem to enforce it so easily, and we were taught at such a young age that if you start driving or if you're in a car, you have to buckle up. We were just taught that. Drinking and driving, we were also taught if you drink, don't drive. If you drive, don't drink. So why can't we be taught as elementary students or as teenagers going through middle school that if you drive, you cannot distract, you should not be distracted while you're driving? A girl who was on the first 20 youth with me, she lost her sister to a distracted driver in Omaha, Nebraska. And to know that her sister is now just a number kills me. It's her number, she's just a statistic now, and that's really what it becomes. They're no longer a person. Everyone just knows them as a number now. They're just another part of the statistic that we're seeing. When I was working out with Allstate in Washington, D.C., they do a lot of ad campaigns out there for the Capitol or whatever newspapers out there. And one of their ads was they had 6 big jumbo jets, and they had teens as if they were boarding the planes, and there were lines of teens, and it said across that 6,000 teens die every day because of distracted driving. If there were 6 jumbo jets that burned a day, or there was a huge tragedy that involved 6,000 teens, Congress would enforce something right away. Well, it's so easy for anyone to get involved. If you want to make a difference, it's as easy as contacting your legislators, making an email out to your representative out in Washington, D.C. I testified out in Pierre last March for a distracted driving bill, for a texting and driving bill, and I know it just got killed this Congress as well, and last year it got killed as well in the House, on the House side that I was testifying for. And it's a matter of contacting a senator in your district, telling them that you are concerned with distracted driving or you are concerned with risky behaviors, and letting them know that your community is aware of what's going on. Get a petition, have people sign saying we want something to happen. Because what we're seeing is when the representatives, either it's out in Washington, D.C. or even in Pierre, they want to hear from their constituents. And if their constituents have a problem, they want to address that problem. We're so impatient nowadays in our society, even adults. Anyone's accountable for being impatient. We seem to not be able to just stop and realize that driving is something that needs to be focused in of itself. You can't do more than one thing while you're driving. A lot of us think we can multitask, and a lot of us think we can do many things at once. But the problem is driving takes such a serious amount of focus that it can't happen. And a lot of us think, well, I got this road down. I know that I'm just going to go straight. I know where to stop. I can check my email really quick. I can check my text really quick. But once that happens and something happens and that crash comes about and you hit someone, everything changes.
Thank you, Elliot. When is it appropriate for a physician really even to become involved in the political process? I mean, here we have an issue that sounds very important. Should we, as physicians, jump in the leadership role in Pierre or Washington?
Well, it's around the topic of advocacy, and we recognize that it's a fine line between personal freedom and improving the health of those that we are all charged with taking care of. And I thought that the example that he gave of the the sea change that we've seen with seatbelt use, much of which was brought about by legislation, that's a great example for where what initially seemed somewhat restrictive, or maybe the argument was it's really very difficult to enforce, but where we've been able to move behavior. And so I think as physicians who are here to try to improve not just the health of the individual patient, but all those that we serve, the health of our nation, I think political advocacy is a very important part of an opportunity for us to take to look at not again just the individual, but the whole,
bigger picture.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at how seatbelt evolved, though, and I mean the older generation didn't become good at seatbelts for no reason. Their grandkids told them that this was the right thing to do, and that's what I learned in kindergarten and first grade. And honestly, with texting, when I first got an iPhone, I texted and I would drive, and I got busted by my 10-year-old at the time, saying, "Mom, that's not okay." And I'm like, oh.
And I think it's a sea change. I would add this, that I was in did peer doctor of the day, actually did doctor of the week, lobbyist of the week doctor thing for 4 years when I was in the State Medical Association leadership role. And lobbied as hard as I could to get a seatbelt requirement, right? We have a passive seatbelt requirement. In other words, if you have an adult has an accident, then they can charge you for not wearing a seatbelt. But if you don't, if you're a child, we've got the law. Up to 18, they're required, and we can stop them. But
and I think that gets back to where does government fit? What is the right thing? When you look at some of the safety rules, like, okay, people, it's a good idea to wear a seatbelt. Let me look at the numbers. It's not hard to figure that out. Do I know people that totally outplay their cars and undo their seatbelts and don't want to follow the rules and have these strange ideas? I don't think you're going to change their behavior by mandating their moral code in some government legislation. I think you got to find a community of, the voice of, families or your doctor's voice that will be motivating to them, where they do trust them.
Yeah.
They don't trust government.
In
If you
other
say, give the law a name, and that way everybody in America is going to do it, you are never going to change behavior that way. You can encourage and educate the young, which will then play on the hearts of the elderly, and that's going to change behavior.
Speaking, I have to remember the very first seatbelt I remember.
What was that?
My mom's right arm.
Yes, mine too.
Yes, I'm holding you, and this will protect you,
We've been there as we're standing up in the front seat.
Yeah, or sitting in your dad's lap, steering.
Yes, South Dakota living.
So, no, I think you're right. My sense is that there's a time when you have too much government, and it shouldn't be a government issue, it should be a taught issue. The problem is that you can bring out, and you can bring on more usage by a law. And when is that freedom of choice worthy of getting good things done? In South Dakota, we're the lowest users.
The reality is that in this country now, 20,000 people per year less than you go back 20 years. We kill 20,000 people fewer on the roads of this country every year. And it's not just a singular issue. It's not just seat belts, but it's sort of been a multi-pronged approach. Seat belts, greater emphasis on drinking.
Cars that are safer.
Lots of things have gone into that. And we've not only reduced death, mortality, but we've reduced morbidity, injury, oftentimes lifelong injury, head injuries, things that we all bear the cost for. And I think that's where we feel that burden, as we know we have a healthcare system that is groaning. It's important to try to remove costs that we'd all be better off for.
Yeah. Thinking about costs, what do you think? What risky behavior probably causes the greatest expense to our health care dollar? Because right now everybody's talking about trying to reduce the cost of health care, as you brought it up. What risk change would bring the greatest money?
Well, if you'd asked that question 20 years ago, I think it would have clearly been smoking.
Smoking, absolutely.
But I think the smoking rates in the country have dropped dramatically, and I'm afraid now it would have to be obesity.
Obesity, absolutely.
Because you think of all the tentacles that come from obesity, all the impact that it has. That if we can deal with that singular issue, because it has effect on heart disease, has effect on diabetes, and we know all the multiple complications of diabetes, all the variant forms, not just of heart disease, but all of vascular disease. So I'd have to say obesity.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that that's a difficult one to treat. All the studies say we fail, almost everything short of surgery.
Well, I think it comes back to that same approach where you look at addiction. You say, why do they self-comfort with food? And that is almost an addiction, right? And it's almost an addiction with the calorie, addiction to let me feel better with food.
Important issue. So you decided that you could put your new flower garden in all by yourself in one afternoon, and now you are in so much pain that you can barely move. Who are you going to call?
The person hasn't been taking care of themselves, they haven't been eating right, they haven't been exercising, and they make a choice to spend a full weekend's 12-plus hour days working on a project, and they haven't been physically prepared for it. The subsequent injuries occur, everything from ligament tears, sprains, strains, muscle injuries, that can definitely affect their life. The weekend warrior syndrome, we often think about, the guy who's 40 years old who thinks they can play like they did when they're 20. Yeah, that's part of it, but I think people need to understand that, not preparing themselves physically by exercising and eating right, you'll end up paying a price if you're not ready for that activity. Probably my number one issue is ankle sprains. An ankle sprain is a very simple injury, and many people are able to rehabilitate from this type of injury, but it can be debilitating, causing pain, swelling, and discomfort. An ankle sprain is a ligament injury, and when a person has this type of injury, it definitely affects their ability to function. The next level of injuries, whether like shoulder injuries that we'll run into, shoulder strains, ligament injuries if they have a fall, rotator cuff tendonitis, very common in throwing sports with weekend warriors. To start with, you look at a cardiovascular regimen at least 3 days a week, 30 to 45 minutes, and as a person becomes older, especially once they reach their decades of the 40s, strength training needs to be integrated into that. 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, your body does lose muscle mass and lose muscle strength. One of the greatest exercises known to man is the push-up. And push-ups are a huge strength improver for your spine and your core, for your shoulders. It has real-world relevance as you build up your spine and your core. It'll help protect your back. It'll help your shoulders with activity if you're pushing or pulling or doing some household chores. Running that tiller in the ground this spring and getting the ground ready, the stronger you are, the less chance you're hurting your shoulders. I don't even know how to describe this. I have at least 5 different people I'm treating with tendon lacerations from this drinking game in this past year and a half. An alcohol-related drinking game, and certainly there's many out there, but one that has come to mind and we've talked about is called Edward 40 Hands, and where an individual has a 40-ounce bottle of liquor strapped to their hands with rubbing it with duct tape, and they need to drink the whole thing. And some of the celebration or ritual is smashing the glass bottle in your hand that's duct taped to your hand, which often leads to tendon lacerations, which need repair within the first week. One of the big concerns that every physical therapist, physician, occupational therapist we are concerned with is fall prevention. Now, sometimes risky behavior can be things like choosing to have throw rugs in their house. They may look nice, but that's a risk they're taking. They could easily trip on those type of devices. So I think fall prevention is really important with that. Choices what they have around their house. Fall prevention can be even knowing their own abilities and knowing their own situation. Making sure that, hey, I'm not ready to go hiking in the Black Hills today. I really am just needing to use my walker to get from point A to point B. And granted, a person doesn't want to be left out. They want to be part of the group, and they want to have those experiences. But if you make a choice to do something that's beyond your physical ability, there's consequences to those actions. Now, sometimes you may be fine, but there's also that high consequence of falling, having fractures, and definitely affecting your life.
Wow. That makes me ask you if you've heard of that weekend warrior type injuries, or that 40 Have you ever heard that
Nope.
drinking game?
I have not.
I have not.
Can you imagine I mean, it's not a smart idea.
Well,
The Edward Forty-Hand
you can go back to, our learning curves. I mean, adolescence and that young youth is about the mistakes made and then correct course. And so let's hope they're correcting course after this. I don't know.
Well, I think, I was asked to speak to a college male fraternity organization about drinking one time, and there was a speaker that was with me, and he was an expert, and I was just a doctor. Somebody asked me. And I remember the expert saying that it's between 17, 18, and about 25 that a male drinks excessively until they realize at 25, don't do that anymore. You're sick, you don't remember, it's hurting you, and they can grow out of it sometimes. Comments, Tom?
Well, particularly, I think it's not just that age, but it's often going off to college, first time away from home, an unfettered environment. Look at hazing. I did never go through hazing. Did either of you join a?
Yeah, I joined a fraternity, and we had hazing. It wasn't that. I mean, 1967, we had some hazing, and some of the guys who were there had been in the war.
Yeah.
Oh my.
There was the tougher hazing, but it wasn't that bad. I can remember actually it brought us together as our pledge
Stop
class.
that! No, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's our whole sales point.
No, that's it. That's the sales point. But I do remember that wild and crazy time of my life. Breaking free from mom and dad, and being on my own and making choices.
But I think that's the point of that time of life, is that you do get to fall and then decide. Are you the one that gets up and corrects course? And society forgives that. They forgive it over and over again at the age of 20 and 18 and 19.
As long as you don't hurt yourself or others.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you look at that learning, and you look at, there's not a time where you can go back through history and say, look, they're supposed to take risks. It's what they do. And then as they learn from the risks, their behavior changes. And if you show up at the age of 35 and say, you know what, I got married too young and I didn't drink and party enough, and I'm going to start doing this at 35, society goes, what the heck's wrong with you? They don't forgive you very well. Society says, you were supposed to go through that at that younger age. And when you don't, society is going to judge you.
So are you telling the 18-year-olds who are listening to this that it's okay to go ahead and take those wild and crazy risks?
I'm saying society sees this, and we have this, shame of, oh, they did this bad decision. But I'm saying it has been done for generations. It's been the cause of the risky, impulsive behavior is really found in that age time, and that's okay.
Particularly with males.
Right.
Males in particular. And
keep them away from a car, but let them experience this. There's a purpose for that. And that correct course and change who you're going to be, that's character development.
Well, I mean, I can't make a comment to this as a physician, but I can certainly make a comment to this as a parent. And all of us here are parents. I think that we all understand kids are going to make mistakes. Our kids are not going to make every decision correctly. And as you're going from, toddlerhood to each stage, we're progressively I don't want to say losing control, but we're ceding control to this child that becomes an adolescent. We know they're going to make mistakes. I think where we have input is to try to put kids in a situation where when they make those mistakes,
they have a place to land.
And there's no long-term harm. Yeah. So that the decisions, the bad decisions they make, bring them no lifelong
Mm-hmm.
regret. And that's a hard walk to walk, but I know all of us have tried to do that.
We've made those.
When you see those adolescents and those teenagers from families that say they are home by this and I've got this kind of control and I do this, and then they exit the home and they're pregnant 6 months later. I mean, you were given too much responsibility too quickly without the guardrails, and so they go from really tight to nothing. That's not what parents are to teach. It is this graduation of risky behavior that they learn to mitigate. And the failure needs to be a correctable consequence, not a death or a death of a friend. I mean,
no. And I think men need to have a male, older male, to say, here's how you do it. You're a protector, not a threat.
Absolutely.
Here at On Call, we have always emphasized that the very best treatment is prevention. don't get hurt in the first place. What can you do to keep your ability to move and function in your everyday life?
It's just better to eat properly and get enough sleep and not abuse your body, because you know, it wears you down if you do that. And exercise is very important, I think. You know, you got to use it to lose it. So if you don't take care of yourself, you get to a certain age and it's hard to get around then. And I think as long as I look after my health, the better my life will be in later age. I started stretching more in the morning because I would have some upper back problems, and you know, then it would be hard to work all day with upper back pain. I'm 58 now, and my lifestyle was quite a bit different when I was 21 and through my 20s. Obviously, the older I get anyway, the more I'm concerned about my health and being able to have some enjoyable later years in life. And so really exercising, diet, proper sleep, just doing the right things is, you know, it's going to pay off in the end. I bicycle, I play golf, and when I golf I always walk, I don't ride. You know, I lift some weights just to keep my back toned up, basically, and you know, nothing. You know, I'm not that much exercise. I'm just trying to maintain myself, and I'm not out to overdo it, I guess. This past winter has been so nice that I've walked about 2 miles for lunch, and it just is very enjoyable with the good weather that we had. And it also seems to give me more energy for the rest of the day when I can get out and do something like that. If you get involved in something, it's much easier to continue rather than to you know, start and stop. And so obviously you take a few days off here and there and do whatever, vacation or whatever, and sometimes it's hard to stay in routine that way. I try to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, high fiber, cut back on red meat and eat more chicken, pork, and you know, cut down on the amount I eat. I think the more you take care of yourself, the better you feel about yourself, and the more enjoyable life is.
Well, that's interesting. The question I would have is stretching. What is your take on the value of stretching, Tom?
Well, I'm a runner, and so I've always debated, should I be spending time stretching or not? And then I've got a little Saturday morning running group, and we've been debating this for years.
Yeah.
Because we have some that want to spend the first 5 minutes, you know, stretching, and the last 5 minutes stretching, and some of us say, hey, I got up at 6:30, let's go, let's go. Well, actually, it's been looked at in runners and followed out for a period of about 2 years, I think. And the incidence of running-related injuries was no different between those
who stretched
and those who didn't. And the summation was, it does not hurt you. You could say that there's no danger to stretching, but it didn't reduce running injuries. I don't know.
Yeah, you look at elasticity in tendons, and it's related to use, not stretching. So get out, go walk, do something, move, and don't waste your time with stretching and then
on the couch you can do all that stretching and it doesn't make any difference. But
Doc, I started my exercise routine, I'm stretching. I'm like, get over it, get out the door.
So that is the question. What would be the best exercise?
Rick, I think you got an answer you want to give us.
Well, one answer is, of course, that which you will do.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
And I think also the best idea is to really start people walking. We, you know, human beings are made to walk. We were back then. You had to walk 10 miles to get enough, you know, to catch a gazelle, to find an egg or a fruit, and to survive. 10 miles to survive every day. And I'm just thinking, if we could get people to do 12 blocks, that's 1 mile.
Yeah, start somewhere.
1 mile.
Yes.
In a big city, because 12 blocks in most cities is not, that's about 3/4 of a mile.
Oh, it's Brookings.
Walk
Must be a big
blocks.
city.
Yeah.
So what is your
South
thought?
Dakota, it's relative, yeah. South
what
Dakota, big city, Brookings. Right.
Well, I don't think, in my own mind, I don't think there's a single best exercise. I think because we all have different, things we enjoy. I mean, I've been a runner. I have some very good friends who are cyclists. We know people that use stationary exercise. Now, for me personally, I don't like stationary exercise. But I like your idea of walking because it's accessible. It doesn't require equipment.
Right.
You can do it anywhere. And that's often a nice entree. And sometimes people might decide to take that further and become to do something else. But running is or walking is a great base, no question.
Yeah, and you can do it all your life. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you can walk the dog. One study shows those who have dogs have to walk the dogs live longer.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it maybe it's.
It is. Get the equipment out of the way. Don't make any more costs go into it. I've seen treatment plan after treatment plan for exercise fail because it's, well, my shoes weren't quite right, or the gym was a little far away, or it wasn't open when I needed. I'm like, stop. Just get out the door. Start.
Walk through the winter in South Dakota. I run and I walk. Do you run through the winter?
I do.
I do too. You just
you have to take. I take some precautions in the winter. I will not run on a uncertain surface because in younger years. Well, I've never suffered an injury, but have fallen, and I know as I've gotten older that fall may be a broken hip. So I will not run on an uncertain surface, at least in the dark. If it's daylight, it's a different story. But in the dark, I'm very, very cautious.
Well, and of course you want to not run in an area where you could be hit, or you could hurt someone else too as well. I think the walking is a fabulous idea, and if we could get every single person to walk 15, 20 minutes every day. It's not 3 days a week. It's every day. Walk a mile every day would make a huge, huge...
That's how we decrease the healthcare costs.
There it is. This discussion is about all the risky behavior that people take, which can be very harmful, such as smoking, drinking too much, driving and texting, driving under the influence of alcohol, riding a bike or cycle without a helmet, not using seat belts, eating too much, and not getting up off that couch, to name a few. No argument. These are life choice type of activities that put an individual or individuals at serious risk of harm. Chances are good that within the last month, your doctor or your spouse has been harping at you about at least one of these. Why are any of us drawn to take risks? Many say that risk-taking is an important part of our creative character, the heart of innovation. And without taking some risks, our lives would be flat, stale, without spice. Google risk-taking and you'll find quotes of famous people advising us to take risks. These suggest that true executive leadership has to have a component of risk-taking in order to bring businesses to change and improve. For example, 19th century French writer André Gide said, "One does not discover new lands without agreeing to lose sight of the shore for a very long time." Jimmy Carter advised us to go out on a limb. That's where the fruit is. Helen Keller encouraged us with these words: "Security is mostly a superstition. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing." And I especially like this one by Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from that safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails. Explore, dream, discover. But wait, these quotes are about taking risks, all about making a change, about bringing oneself out of old routines and habits that are not advancing the cause, about seeing ways to get better and getting there. If you're caught in the grips of a risky habit that could be harmful to you or to someone you love, take the chance on a change. Discover new lands. Go out on a limb. Dare to adventure and catch the trade winds to get out of a bad habit and change for the better. So, Dr. Braithwaite, what's your reaction to that?
Well, that is a powerful clip, and it makes me think of something I've heard in the office, and I'll bet you guys have heard it as well. We've been talking to someone about behaviors, something that they could choose to change. And what do we sometimes hear back? Well, doc, you have to die of something.
Oh,
I hear that.
Yes.
Heard that?
Yeah.
And I've heard that more times than I can count. And I have to just honestly say, that's always bothered me. That has bothered me because we also have walked into rooms and had to deliver news that was bad to people who had no control whatsoever about what fate had brought into their lap.
Yep.
You know, I've dealt with a life-threatening disease that I had nothing to do. I've had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I've been through a stem cell transplant. Things that I would have given anything to change, although they've been rich experiences in part of my life. But you know, we've had to take care of individuals who would have given anything if they could have another chance, and it's over things that they could not control. So when we're thinking about choices, it's not just about embracing life, because I've also heard it said, you know, you have to flaunt death, but then you devalue life. And that's what really this is about, is valuing and embracing life and making choices, not just for ourselves, but as I think the powerful image in that video is not just that he was saved, but that who was there.
Yeah.
It's his family and those that we love. And so the choices we make have impacts outside of just our own personal sphere, but also those who love and care about us.
Yeah, well, my sister died with her head smashing into a windshield at 19. So that kills me to watch that video. Yeah. And Annette, comment?
I look at that exact comment of, you got to die of something, and I hear that from a lot of these teenagers that are using, and I am so captured by how that ties back into what their families also continue to say, is they lead those examples and they try to spark change. It really is our own personal choices every day.
We need to make good choices. I think that's an important thing. And take the opportunity to grapple with whatever it is that's keeping us in the wrong direction. So, take-home messages?
Yeah. You know, fear is very motivating, and when I hear them say things like, don't, I have to die of something, fear will change some behaviors, but it's short-lived.
Thank you both so very much.
Great to be here, Rick. Thanks.
That closes the book for our show on risky behavior. According to T.S. Elliot, only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. I sincerely thank our studio guests for visiting with us about this very important topic. Dr. Annette Bosworth, a Sioux Falls outpatient internist with a special interest in informatics, and Dr. Tom Braithwaite with the Sanford Health System. And this April, he steps up to the role of governor of the ACP.
From you, Rick. Taking the reins from you.
And thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, stay healthy out there, people.
Plan on attending Doctors in Concert for Kids, 7 p.m. on Saturday, April 14th at the Orpheum Theater in Sioux Falls. Enjoy an evening of musical entertainment featuring several South Dakota doctors playing a wide variety of music, all to support the Children's Care Hospital and School.
Funding for this program is provided in part by
Avera is a proud sponsor of On Call on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
and by the South Dakota Foundation for Medical Care, the Medicare Quality Improvement Organization for South Dakota. Additional funding provided by Dakota Care, the Brookings Health System, Regional Health, the South Dakota American College of Physicians, and Swiftel Communications. Closed captioning for On Call is provided by the generous support of Avera, the Brookings Health System, and Fishbaugher Financial Corporation.